Good evening. This is the king of all mediums, and I'd like to welcome you to part number three of the uh, Manson deep dive. And this part will take us from March 21st, 1967 to August of 1968. Okay, so on before I start, a few housekeeping things. Um, Now, yeah, okay, so there's a new book I'm reading. It's pretty good. What's good about it is that you kind of don't have to buy the other books because rehash all the other books kind of summarized. Now is the only time that is real, a deep dive in a re-examination, I'm sorry, of the Manson murders, motives, myths, motives and mythos by Neil Sanders. It's a pretty good book, kind of a pro-Manson book, basically saying that he wasn't the guru that everyone says he was, and but it has some interesting things. But there's a lot of stuff that has been covered, and it kind of he does a good job tying everything together. He does write well, which is good. So, um, oh, and another thing, I can't believe how I forgot this. The One of the podcasts I failed to mention. There's many good podcasts on the Manson phenomena, and one of them I forgot. I don't know, the Porch Tapes by Michael Channels, and this is one of the better ones too. He has a whole bunch of videos of Manson appearances of different members of the family. He's actually friends with Manson, and even Manson wrote a will in 2002, and that he's trying to claim the estate at this point. So it's called the Back Porch Tapes TV by Michael Channels. So that's an excellent source. Okay, so let's begin our story on March 21st, the vernal equinox of 1967. And so the jailers say to Manson in Terminal Island, San Pedro, California, okay, Charlie, time to go. And Manson doesn't want to go. He likes prison because it's structure. And he doesn't like the outside world. He doesn't like the uncertainty of the outside world. So he wants to stay, but finally they push him out the door and they give him $35. He has a guitar, some clothing, and they tell him, uh, and he goes on his way. He meets a trucker in L.A. and they smoke a little pot and they hang out for a bit. And Manson goes to San Francisco eventually. Don't know how he got there, but he took a bus, hitchhiked, stole a car. Isn't seen now. One fact Tom O'Neill got wrong. He said that Manson went from LA to San Francisco, and that itself was a parole violation. However, it has been reported that Manson did get uh, permission to go from LA to San Francisco by his parole officer in the guise of some musical club dates up there. So this isn't that was not true by Mr. O'Neill. Okay, so now he actually goes not really to San Francisco, but across the bay to Berkeley. And the reason why he goes to Berkeley, he has an ex-con contact up there. So he's hanging out in University of California, Berkeley, and he's hanging out playing guitar, busking. If you know what busking is, play your guitar. You have a little cup. People throw money in it, and no one wants to get a real job these days. You know, 9 to 5. Who wants a real job? So anyway, so this woman comes upon him, and this woman's named Mary Bruner, and she's a assistant librarian at the University of California at Berkeley. And Manson tells her to play. He's homeless. He doesn't have a place to stay, and Bruno takes her in. Takes him in. At first, the relationship is platonic, but eventually, Manson, with his guiles and his charisma, eventually sleeps with her and gets to stay at the apartment. Originally, it was just a few days until he could get on his feet, but Manson had decided that made the situation too thing. And eventually, as Bruno went to work, Manson was bringing girls in, and Bruno did not like this. I mean, he was upfront with her, and he told her, there'd be other women, and I think there was up to 8 at one time that were coming back and forth with Manson and crashing at Mary Bruner's apartment. Um, so um, now, when Manson got up to San Francisco, it was a very different world from the 50s, and people straight and the straight world of the post-war baby boom. It was a summer of love, peace, vibes, LSD, pot. It was a different world, and Manson tried LSD for the first time, and it was a life-changing event for him. Okay, and he recognized its ability as a suggestibility tool to convince people of his harebrained ideas. Okay, um, so yeah, Manson essentially was a pimp, and he took a lot of the ideas from pimping and other tricks of the con men do. And also, he would go around. There was a lot of guys in the summer of love, there's peace, and good vibes. There's a lot of gurus, lecturing, and he took a lot of what they were saying, and he used a lot of this in his philosophy. And as we talked about in part one, he also was big into Scientology, and another big part of his ideas were the book Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Okay, so that was a big thing. Now, Manson eventually builds a core five, usually a core four of women followers. And of course, they start with Mary Bruner. Um, he then gets a woman, Patricia Krenwinkel. I think he met through a friend. Um, and so Manson, for some reason, goes down to L.A. and he's in Venice Beach, and he sees a redheaded girl, young girl, maybe 18, 19, on the beach, looking very sad, sitting on a bench. And he goes up to her and he says, "I bet your father threw you out of your apartment." And she said, "Yeah, how'd you know?" He's a genius, Manson. So he said, "Well, why don't you come with me? I'm traveling, but we're gonna travel by bus, me and a few girls." And so at first she wasn't into the idea. So after he gave his whole spiel, he walked away, and then Lynette Fromy, that's how you pronounce it, Lynette Squeaky Fromy, ran after him, and so they became an item, and they went back to San Francisco, and that's the rest of the story. And of course, eventually Lynette Frome tried to assassinate President Gerald Ford in 1975. She spent a long time in jail for. Um, Now, the first two girls, as a pimp, Manson would call backdoor girls. That means they weren't like the best looking women, though I think Patricia Cranwick always got, I don't think she was that terrible looking. The thing with her was that she had a hormonal imbalance, which gave her some body hair, which that was the most attractive thing on a woman. But they always said that men didn't want to sleep with her, and And Manson, when he first met her, said, "You're beautiful," and she was like, "That was the first person that ever said that to me." So, Manson really, and Manson always would tell the when the girls when he was making love to him, make believe I'm your father. so, so he's getting some really creepy stuff there. Um, so one of his first front door girls was Susan Atkins. Now, by means no beauty, but uh, a good looking girl. And so one day, there was a lot of crash pads up in San Francisco and things like that. And one day, Manson was playing "Shadow of Your Smile" by Frankie Lane. You look that up on YouTube. And Susan Atkins, was in one of the crash pads. He heard it, immediately was mesmerized by Manson. Eventually made love with him that night, and she became a follower. Um, Things got so weird to the point that Patricia Krenwinkel had a job in the insurance industry. Basically, she quit her job. In fact, she left her car and her last two paychecks. To give you an idea of how, also Mary Bruner, she quit her job as an assistant librarian at the University of California at Berkeley. So, so Manson's building a little follower. Also, another girl is Ella Jo Bailey, who Manson would eventually call Yeller. You could guess what that is. So Yeller was a friend of Susan Atkins, and Susan Atkins said, "Man, I meet this great guy. He's so cosmic, or whatever." um, I don't know how people attract followers. I'm not the guy, so don't ask me. Okay, now a very important person Manson meets is this guy Dean Morehouse, about in middle age, in the mid 40s, let's say. He was a preacher, Pentecostal preacher, and Manson meets him. He's hitchhiking one day, and man, he's so impressed with Manson that Dean Morehouse takes him back to his house, and Manson's impressed by a couple of things at the house. First, this old battered piano, and Manson goes, "I really like that piano." Morehouse probably had no use for it. So you want it? And Manson goes, "Okay, I'll take it." so, um, so that was one thing. And Manson eventually, but how he did, I don't know, traded that a piano. He went down the street and he convinced someone to trade a VW bus, a microbus, I guess they called him, for the uh, the old battered piano. And now Manson had one of the problems was getting around. They had a hitchhike. Now they had some way to travel around. Now, Manson was also impressed by Dean Morehouse's 14-year-old daughter, Ruth Ann, and so impressed that Ruth Ann ran away with him, ran away with the family, and of course, under Manson's gentle cajoling and lovemaking and uh, charisma. Now, um, so Manson and now I think he has 5 followers or six, whatever. So he is the bus now. They're decorating it, and Manson's so impressed. He wants to go back and thank Morehouse. He's like, "Wow, that was Morehouse. I wouldn't have any of this. Got the girls. I got his daughter." so gives Morehouse a visit. Goes take goes Morehouse goes visits him, and Morehouse isn't too happy that his daughter's left, and puts a gun to his right. I think it's a rifle. And Manson was great in these situations, and he said, "Listen, calm down, think this over. Listen, if you're gonna shoot me, shoot me." And he said, "Listen, why don't you try this?" And he gave him LSD, and Morehouse calmed down, and took the LSD, and he was an instant convert to Charlie. So Manson now converted Morehouse, had his daughter, although at this point the daughter had to leave for a little bit get married to get independent from the Morehouse's dean and his wife, and but eventually she would come back. So so the acid really turned Morehouse, and he thought Charlie was Jesus Christ. Another interesting around that area, the Northern Cal San Francisco area, was a group called the Diggers. The Diggers scrounged food from dumpsters, um, and Manson, like especially the women, did all the work. And one thing he didn't like is that they try to help others. Manson wasn't into that. Okay, um, so Manson has his little coterie, and also he also with the microbus, he took the microbus and he with $35 he traded it for a school bus. And so now he has a school bus much bigger, for his growing family, and they decorated Hollywood Productions. Painted it black and put Hollywood Productions. um, so Manson decides to go back to L.A. at this point to see some of his own connections. To get, I remember we talked about part one. He had some connections to Phil Kaufman with Gary Stromberg, who we called the Hebrew, and Gary Stromberg, Uni Records, which is a pretty big deal. And two things that happened. First of all, Manson didn't like the fact that Stromberg wanted a black artist to help Manson out with horns, and the black artist was Hugh Maskela. So he didn't like that. And another thing they noticed that Manson was big into the Bible. He kind of looked Jesus. So they were thinking of doing a Christ comes back to earth, the second coming of Christ, that type of thing. So Manson would be a technical advisor, but the thing kind of fell apart when Manson found out the Christ coming, second coming to the United States was black. So that kind of ruined everything. Manson was a big racist, unfortunately. Um, so eventually that didn't work out with Gary. Um, um, Now another important person he meets is Bobby Beausoleil, which he later called the Frenchman, and he meets him at the Spiral Staircase House. Now, um, and this is in Topanga Canyon in the Los Angeles area. And Bobby Beausoleil, as we'll see in part, I guess, four, will become very important in our story of the guru. Um, Now, around the LA area, there was another type of a commune called the Hog Farm. If you ever watched the Woodstock movie, this guy Wavy Gravy, his real name was Hugh Romney, and um, one of the followers from were the Lakes, and they had a daughter, Diane Lake, and she decided to go with the family, and her parents even said, "Okay, go with them," and that was kind of a weird thing. The Manson family also met a guy named Gary Hinman at this time, who was a music teacher, a Buddhist, and a part-time drug dealer. Who made mescaline, and so they met the Hinman through Bobby through Bobby Beausoleil, and also it said that Manson also met Dennis Wilson through Bobby Beausoleil. So I'm sorry, through Hinman, uh, not the story that's, although not the story that is put out, which we'll get to, of the meeting with Manson and the Dennis Wilson, the Beach Boys. Um, Now, this point, about April 1st, 1968, Mary Bruner gives birth to Manson's son, Michael Valentine Manson, were called Pooh Bear. That was his nickname, April 1st, 1968. Also, Mary Bruner at this point is sporting a lot of black eyes, and Manson's violence to women starting to show rear its ugly head at this point. So, he's being violent to some of the women, and like many pimps are. So, the pimp situation is very similar to what's happening. Um, Now, at this point, the band, the Beach Boys, becomes very important to our story, as the Beach Boys, are early American surf band, the early '60s, and as the summer of love and the psychedelic music and all these great bands came out of Southern California, they were kind of left aside, and went on a disastrous tour in 1968 where they had the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi giving lectures, and they would play, and it was just they lost a lot of money on the concert, so they were looking for a new direction, and Dennis Wilson was really looking for a new guru, you know. Um, um, by the way, at this point, also Ruth Ann Morehouse came back. She was away; she had to go away from the wild because of the father, but she eventually came back. Um, yeah, so Manson started to use his techniques. One of his techniques, interesting enough, was his followers. He tried to erase the history of his past, their past. They want one of the ways is by changing their names. Susan Atkins was given the name Sadie Mae Glutz. For example, they wanted to talk about their past and other things we'll discuss in part three. Um, late spring and 1968. Now, the story that usually gets around about the meeting of Dennis Wilson by Manson is that two of Manson's followers, Patricia Krenwinkel and Ella Jo Bailey, were hitchhiking, and guess who stops by? He stops to pick him up. Dennis Wilson. And so Wilson takes to him his sprawling mansion on 14400 Sunset Boulevard, which is an old log cabin, but huge, huge. Will Rogers once lived there, the American humorist. And for milk and cookies, you know what that means. So what happened was basically, um, Dennis said, "Okay, I'm gonna go do a recording session. I'll be back, and we'll take off. We'll take off where we left off." So he comes back about 3 in the morning, and the lights on. And he says, "What the hell's going on?" At this point, Wilson, by the way, was divorcing his wife. He had two kids, so he's just looking for some fun, and of course, he's greeted by a little man, 5'3", 5'2", 5'3" man, and he goes to this 5'2", 3" man. "Are you gonna hurt me?" He goes, "Do it look like any? I'm gonna hurt you?" And he starts kissing his toe. Of course, the 5'2", 5'3" man was Charlie Manson, and this meeting was very prosperous for both of them, is because Manson had exactly what Wilson wanted: women who would be willing to do anything for him, all the drugs he wanted, and so at first it was a dreamlike situation for both. And the Manson family had, a nice place to be. They could take showers. They had food. They had money, all kinds of things. And so, and Manson started playing the guitar for Wilson. He became very impressed with Wilson. Dennis Wilson, the Beach Boy, became the drummer. Became very impressed by Manson, and he became very his philosophy became he became his new guru. He started calling him the wizard. Like in one interview, he goes, "I live with 17 girls, and I know this guy Charlie Manson, and sometimes the wizard scares me. Sometimes the wizard scares me. I would say so. Um, One of the guys was a producer, Greg Jacobson. He calls and he says, "You got to come see this guy and these people, because there's 14 women. There's Charlie, maybe one male hanger on." Um, Now, this is where Manson supposedly meets. Now, it used to be called Tex Watson, but for the purpose of the 2000, we'll call him Tex Watson. Okay, so Tex Watson, and how he meets Dennis Wilson is interesting. Dennis Wilson was hitchhiking because both of his cars were in the shop, and so he picked a 1935 like Ford truck. Uh, that would probably be 1995, 1995 truck today. He picks up Dennis Wilson. So Tex to Watson picks up Dennis Wilson, and he takes him back to his house where Wilson meets where Tex Watson meets Manson, and he's like, "Man, this is great, all these women, drugs, and Watson, who is extremely important to the story, we'll talk about in more detail. Uh, but Watson's a Texan. His name was Charles. A lot of Charleses, as we'll see. Charles Tex Watson. Eventually, he got the name Tex from a fellow George Spahn because of his Texas accent. And so as time goes on, any great situation, of course, comes to an end. So what happens is that the Beach Boys management noticed that a lot of over $100,000 has been spent by Wilson. Now, what are the costs? Well, a lot of gonorrhea going around with all sex. So a lot of medical visits. He had all the Manson women's teeth fixed. He had food and all kinds of expenses. And supposedly, I don't know if this is true. The end of the line came when Charlie went to Central California one day with with a truck, and he brought a cow back too, 'cause he wanted the milk. Or I don't know the exact story, but so Wilson at this point had enough. He had all the drugs he had all the women, and by the way, I forgot to mention Ruth Ann Morehouse was a front door girls. So Manson wanted to accumulate more of those. Had a lot of back door girls. So he considered Atkins and Ruth Ann Morehouse front door girls. So I don't know where that came from, but so at this point, about late July of 1968, um, kind of had it. He's Beach Boy management's getting on him. We're gonna cut you off. You know, and so what happens is Wilson one day just leaves in the middle of the night, and so Nick Grillo and a bunch of probably pretty sizable guys come over, and they evict the family. Okay, so the family is out the door at some point in the '68. They evict them, and so this pretty much ends the part number uh, two. Part number two. Okay, uh, so part number two is from March 21st when Charlie gets out of jail to August of 1968, where the Manson family, who's staying at Dennis Wilson, the Beach Boys' house, is kicked out. Is kicked out, and we'll discuss where they went. So the next episode, part three, will go from um, August 1968 to June 30th, 1969. And we'll see why July 1st, 1969 is a very important date in the Manson family history. I want to thank you and have a great evening.